This is Come On Feel the Illinois by Sufjan Stevens. I picked it because it is my favourite album of all time. The most human album I think I've heard. Yeah, like I hadn't heard anything like it before. I was coming into it because when I first heard this, my music taste was very much like very small, only a select few artists all in the same genre. So it's like my first time I like properly branched out into like folk, like country and like singer-songwriter music.
Okay. So it sort of like brought on a big change of
massively.
Your whole musical world.
It kind of came. I first started listening to it when I was 16. So it was when I was going into college. It was like quite like a transitional period for me, you know, like coming out of that school mentality. Coming into just like big changes around me. And so it came at the perfect time.
Oh, good.
What I love about it is the mix of like collective and personal history.
To be fair, I think that's something that struck me a lot. Like from the half of the album that I've heard, it seems like very personal, but at the same time, like it's trying to encapsulate like a whole place in one album, which is super interesting. So
speaking of place, you might as well go back to you've got to go to the roots to really talk about it. So this is his 5th album, but his previous 2. So his previous, it was 2 albums ago. It was called Michigan, and that is essentially the same thing, of like following the history of a state. Because they had the like idea of doing one for every American. The 50 state project. Which would have been
it's so crazy.
That would have been an amazing amount of music, quite a task to achieve, especially attaching yourself to like states you've never been. So like he's from Michigan, and like he grew up a lot coming into like Illinois, so he's got like a personal connection to this place. And it's just. So I think, like, looking at it, you just look at the names on it.
The names of the songs,
and
so
you just see all these like places,
laborious,
and like people, and like obviously coming from the UK. I've never heard of I hadn't heard of any of this history until I listened to this. And it makes you want to actually like explore like this place you've never heard of. Like I've been aware of like Chicago. Everyone knows Chicago. But like Illinois is like a state I feel like a lot of people just like forget about.
Does the album make you want to go to all the places?
Yes, so one of the inserts, the credits insert in this is a map of Illinois.
Oh, that's
and it's
so
illustrated.
Cool,
and it's got like all the place names that I mentioned in the songs. And it's made me just want to like make my own like route of what I would do.
It seems. In that kind of way, it makes me think of like a book or something. With some books have like a map at the beginning. And like also just like the detail in the song names and the details in the songs themselves. Like it seems like it could be made into like a film or a book. Or
I think it is really cinematic in the way it works. So it has. So the first song concerning the UFO sighting is very much like a melodic, very like melancholy track. And then straight after, you've just got this instrumental build-up of this huge explosion of just like beautiful noise and arrangements. And I see it as like so the first song I see is like a prologue, it's like setting up scene, and then the next song, the Black Hawk War, that's like the credits, the opening credits.
I see.
Because the how it ends is track 20 is like this big finale, absolutely massive finale. Like,
okay, that's interesting because I've not quite got to the end of it yet, so it's
It like builds up to this huge moment, and then the last 2 songs are just instrumental again. So it almost
maybe
acts
like the credits at the end of the film.
It acts as like the epilogue and then the credits. And
I see.
What's interesting is I say it's cinematic, but they've actually adapted it into a theatre production this year.
That makes so much sense to me.
So they've turned it into a musical.
From like some of the sounds that I've heard so far on the album do sound like they would fit well in that world.
Whenever I tell people to listen to it, I always ask them if they like musical theatre first, because I feel like if you do, you're going to get loads out of it. If not, you still get loads out of it. But
I wouldn't say that I'm like a fan of musical theatre, but it's more in the way that I've not been exposed to it much. But this feels like a really good like entry point.
Yes,
and I think also because I went to that show last night, and like just the world of like the theatres seems so engaging.
It's like so like bombastic and just
Yeah.
like I feel like that's a good word to describe theatre for
Bombastic.
me. Yeah, it's just very much like, you know, the emotions are all heightened. Everyone acts like as like a greater form of like a person. And then songs like Chicago or like him growing up and like, you know, like aspiring to do greater but still being held back because of like, you know, his ties to the place.
Yeah.
But then you've got songs where he is just talking from like a wider perspective of using loads of we and us.
Yeah.
And he's talking about time periods where like he, you know, like 200 years before he would have been born.
Yeah.
So like Jacksonville, the song, it's all about the state capital, Jacksonville of Illinois.
Yeah.
And discussing how like the founder of that place is like a very like he was not a great guy. He was a very like massive like Republican, like very racist, but dealing with like the still, you know, tackling those views, like that idea of like being like created by that type of person, but still holding like a very like proud like feeling for the place regardless.
Yeah, sort of like very conflicting emotions.
Yeah.
To do with place and people. Yeah.
That's what I love about it. The fact that it is just like about like he takes a lot of care to like show these different perspectives of place and like of how people feel about like where they're from.
Yeah.
Because the second song is dealing with like the whole like displacement of like Native Americans.
Yeah.
And like how like, you know, this was their land and then it's been overtaken. And I feel like a lot of people could see this as being like very like pro-American, this album, like on like first look, you know, like to have like an album dedicated entirely to an American state and like so proud about it. And when you listen, you hear all about the critiques and all about like how it's not all perfect, but you know, you can still find like a home within it.
Yeah. So is that what appealed to you to begin with when you first heard the album, or is this sort of a like conclusion that you've drawn from it like in your wise old age?
I feel like that's definitely something I've come to appreciate more so listening to it over the years.
What type of thing first like got you into it when you were like, you say you were 16? Yeah.
It was just the sheer layers to the music, you know.
Yeah.
Like I said, you start the first song's just a piano. It's very like there's some chord progressions in the background, but they're very like minor.
Very moody, the first track.
And then upon the first two like following tracks, it's just such beautiful like walls of noise that I've ever really experienced. All these like string instruments and like horns. The horns I think are a massive part of why I love this. I love the trumpets. I think they just add such a beautiful like grandness to it all that I feel like, you know, it would be missing the theatrical charm if it didn't have that.
Yeah. Should we cross over?
Yeah. But what I love is how...
Should we go down here?
Yeah.
I think we're free. But yeah, do you think there's more for you to explore for this album? Because you've kind of said you've drawn more conclusions about it across the years. Do you think you'll I think it's kind of quite a hard question to answer, but do you think like there's more untapped potential?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've recently, over like summer, I was like pondering the idea of making doing a writing project on this album.
Oh, okay.
Researching into each, because you know, each song provides you all these details about these events that have happened, but they give you a taste, and I feel like you could definitely peel back more like the actual historical context on a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I'd love to just like explore that in writing.
Yeah. It seems like quite a lot of the pleasure that you've got through this album is like a intellectual pleasure, like piecing it all together and things like that, which is something that I can like also like, I think I do that quite a lot with like albums and books, like especially like tough books to read. Like it makes me think a lot about David Foster Wallace.
Yeah. Like
with the length of the album, the length of the songs, the sort of the cleverness of like the titles. Like I think one of the songs is about like a lady who went insane, and it's like for good reason, and it's like very smart, very sort of to the point. So it makes me think a lot of his books. I think the pleasures you've got out of it seem to be aligned with the pleasures that I got out of his books too, even though it's an album.
You know, it's cool to see like there's like the feelings of like crossover between like, you know, like different forms of like art. That's like he is my favorite artist of all time since listening to this. I've listened to all of his stuff because there was such like a connection between like the lyrics and like just my like own feelings, what I was going through. So
Yeah.
You know, he. So when I was coming 16, I was coming to terms with like my queerness and my sexuality.
Yeah.
And I hadn't really delved much into like queer artists. But then when I found this like album, there's moments in here which really reflected how I felt. Yeah, The Predatory Wasp in the Palisades. That song's about his first romance he had with another man.
Yeah.
But I guess in this case, another boy. It's when he was young in summer camp.
Yeah.
And like hearing that, like, you know, it like really touched me because it's like, you know, I've had these similar experiences where like at the time I really didn't like appreciate them for what they were, and it really helped me just like grow into like who I am. And it was when I met my boyfriend around that time.
I see,
and so, you know, it really reflected that. But in terms of wider tastes, like it got me into wanting to do, funny enough, like it's music, but it made me want to do film, like study film, because at the time I was like going to try and do like photojournalism, like going into that for uni. But then upon listening to this, I realised like I have such a more had more of a passion for wider storytelling and like the idea
which is so great that could come from an album.
Like I hadn't really just thought about before the idea of like exploring like narratives and like not just that but like the context behind it, because like you're right, like having it from an album, like it wasn't all the films I was watching at the time, it was this that like really did it, and I'm really grateful for that.
I feel like a lot of the time now albums are just like a collection of like 12 songs, 10 songs or something, where it just feels like it is also like tightly bound.
Yeah, the arrangement.
Like each track is so important to the next one, and the overall themes and the people and things like that are talked about.
The arrangements on it, are just insane. Like the whole the idea that he's, you know, I imagine he worked on it for a long time, but it released within a year period of like his previous album.
Yeah.
And like the depth on that was just insane. So for him to one-up it on this, I've recommended it. Like every single person I've gotten like really close to, like I've recommended it to them just because like if they've asked me like for someone to listen to, this is it. Great for like traveling. So anyone who's going on a journey,
that's exactly what I thought. I wish I had a car to like play this in.
Great for like just going across wide spaces. I recommended it to Sophie when Sophie went on holiday, because I was like, you know what, listen to this on like your flight and on trains, because you really appreciate, you feel like because of the time passing as you're going through these lands, you really appreciate like the distance within the music. Where was it? I noticed there was a song. Let's hear that string part again, because I don't think they heard it all the way back in Bloomington Normal. That's so interesting to me, because you don't know where in the state that song is referring to, like where it's being played, but you know that you can feel like the distance within those words. And I just love that. I just love like the scale of it. It's just absolutely massive. My favourite song is Chicago.
To be fair, I think that's one of the ones I have heard so far, and it
stands out.
Yeah, I can see why it's like very strong in a lot of ways.
I have like a really personal attachment to it, because I dropped out of college, and the day that I like failed my exams and everything, I was in a really bad mood, and I just walked out and put my playlist to shuffle, and that was the first song that came on.
That's interesting.
I instantly felt very relieved. I felt really calm, and I was walking out of like college with like a smile on my face, because it made me realise that no matter like how crap it felt in that moment, it was just a small hurdle. Like I can get over it. You know, like all things continue on. It's not just the end of the world.
Like I feel like that's part of the song, isn't it? That like things will happen, and that's okay, whether they're good or bad.
And just like to let it happen. Just don't fight it. You know, if you're gonna fail, and then build up from that.
I'll have to play the whole 100%.
album. 100%.